So we're at the ACCS Conference, Preparing the Ruins Conference 2025, sitting down with Lennox Kalifungwa from New St. Andrews College. So Lennox, why don't we start with just kind of telling us who you are?
Well, thanks for having me on, firstly. It's good to spend time with you. Yeah, so I'm with New St. Andrews College. My forte is very specifically just communications for both marketing and fundraising, and really just trying to create digital content and writing on the blog and those kinds of things. So anything that's about messaging that is outward facing.
Sure.
And I run a podcast on New St. Andrews College. I actually got two podcasts. One of them is Of Flames and Crowns, which is specifically tailored to deal with culture. So it's about cultural engagement.
Okay.
And then the second one is Kings and Statesmen, which is about political engagement very specifically. So I enjoy doing both those things, and it's been very good so far.
And both of those, I've seen it on YouTube. Both of those on YouTube? I don't know if I've seen the Kings.
So Kings and Statesmen is, we've posted some snippets on YouTube, but we have a platform called NSA Patrons. It's an app and a website as well, and we have tons of content that we're uploading there. So that's where you can find that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've watched a number of them. Mentioned to you before we were recording. So we interviewed Dr. Rigney last year, Dr. Merkel. I think you've had both of those guys on on the podcast. So what is kind of the aim of that podcast? What's the goal? What are you trying to accomplish there?
Really what we're trying to do is just have important cultural conversations and get people thinking about how they can engage with culture from a distinctly Christian perspective.
Okay.
And I think that we need a lot more of that way of thinking. We still are very much in, I'd say, the beginning stages of people starting to awaken to the need to actually engage culture. And I think people are asking the questions of how best they can do so.
Yeah.
And I think that involves a few things. And firstly, I think it involves just people developing categories through which they can discern what's happening in the world around them. And so what I'm trying to do with this podcast is just give people those categories and give them some tools that will help them actually engage effectively.
Yeah.
And so there's a sense in which this is a form of cultural apologetics, where people actually have to engage with people and make arguments that are truthful and compelling. But beyond just making arguments, to actually be involved in the actual building of Christian culture. So we don't just want philosophers. We want builders, people who can actually do something with their hands and build. And so this podcast is designed to encourage that way of thinking and for people to live in this precise way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe before we get to some of those tools, why do that, right? Why? Because there is a section of Christianity that would say we shouldn't even be engaging culture.
Yes. Well, we do so because Christ is King.
There you go.
And maybe that sounds like it's a cliche of some sort, but it's true.
Yeah.
Christ is King, and because he's King, absolutely every single area of life, every realm of life belongs to him and him alone. Therefore, culture belongs to him and him alone.
Yeah.
And his final address to his disciples, which is detailed in Matthew 28, which is about discipling the nations, it rests upon the premise of him having authority in heaven and on earth.
Right.
And because he's got authority in heaven and earth, we're then called to disciple the nations. And what does that look like? Well, I think that's about building distinct Christian cultures everywhere we go. Being his hands and feet in the places that he places us very specifically. Yeah. And that's why it's so needed. So we do it because Christ is King, because of who he is, and because of who he's called us to be as those who are in him. Yeah. It is our role to be builders of Christian culture.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you referenced Matthew 28. I also think of the Lord's Prayer.
Yes.
Where he says, your will be done.
Absolutely. On earth as it is in heaven. That's exactly it. Right. Christ teaches us to pray that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So how about when we're engaging culture, there's problems in the culture. What would you say are kind of some of the major ones that Christians should be pushing back against?
Yes. I mean, there's so much to say here. Yeah. I think the easy low-hanging fruit here would be secularism, and basically the attempts of people to pry away the hands of God in the affairs of men. Right? I think that's generally my basic definition of what secularism is. But here's the interesting thing. I actually think that there's something more dangerous than secularism, and that's actually pietism. I think of pietism and secularism as twin sisters.
Sure.
as two sides of the same coin. The secularist attempts to push God out of the public square. The pietist says amen to that claim and retreats into a little corner and does nothing.
Right.
And in that sense, I actually think pietism is more potent than secularism. I think that wherever you see chaos in this world, wherever you see chaos in the culture, I think that is a symptom of the church not doing what it's supposed to do. Right. It's the church that has discipled the nations into that chaos. One other way I like to put it is the state of the culture is the resume of the church.
Yeah.
And so I think that we have to do the work of cleaning up house within and start to understand the implications of Christ's kingship and his lordship over every single area of life. And that is what I think is going to help us push back on things like secularism.
Yeah.
For as long as we remain impotent in our pietism, we will never be able to address the problem of secularism.
Right.
And so there's a sense in which the biggest problems with the culture are almost always the biggest problems in the church.
Yep.
Right. And for as long as the church is unfaithful, the culture will be destructive.
Right.
For as long as the church is faithful, I think the culture will grow and be fruitful in the ways that God intends for it to be fruitful. So, of course, secularism, pietism, I mean, there's so much more we can talk about. We can talk about statism, the idea that the government is a functional deity that rules and controls absolutely everything. I think that's a very real problem. Modernity, which is just all about unhinging ourselves from history and moving forward in the way that appeases the appetites of man in whatever way he deems fit. Yeah. Those are real things, and I think they're encroaching and they're all around us, and we need to address those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're here at an education conference.
Yes.
Right. So how would you say those three things? So you mentioned the pietism, secularism, statism.
Right.
How has our failures in the United States in education in the West, I guess you would say, led to maybe some of those things?
That's a good question. One of the things that I like to think about very often is just the line of thought about when did this happen? When did pietism begin to grow in the way that it's begun to grow? And I had a conversation with a philosopher, a Christian philosopher, Vishal Mangalwadi. I don't know if you've heard of him before, but he's a brilliant thinker.
Yes. Yeah, I've listened to that interview.
Okay, fantastic. And I agree with his thesis on this, which is basically the idea that theology became isolated from the rest of life. When theology became divorced from every other discipline, that is what started to build that pietism. That is exactly what gave license to the secularism. And one of the things he specifically notes is how at a higher education level, you have seminaries that basically broke away from universities, where theology started to be treated as a distinct school of thought that has no real implications in the real world. And therefore, it left a gap that was swallowed up by secularism. Now, when everyone thinks about everything in the world, there's secularist impositions on whatever discipline is being considered, and theology has been pushed into some corner that is left to appease the appetites of nerdish folk who like old languages. That's often how it's treated. And so I think what we need to recover in education is this holistic way of thinking about the world. First of all, again, all things belonging to Christ. And understanding that theology really is the queen of the sciences. It's the very discipline that undergirds everything true, everything good, everything beautiful.
Yeah.
I love a conference like this because these are the kinds of things that are being underscored. And I think that this was lost when we thought that the only things that really matter are things that pertain to personal salvation, personal devotion, and things of the church, and very little else. And so we want to see people get saved. We want to punch tickets to heaven, but we don't really have a vision for building, for what it looks like to flourish in a very holistic way. And I think that's what a true Christian education is supposed to do. It's supposed to be freeing, and it's supposed to produce flourishing. I think freedom and flourishing are exclusive to truth. They're exclusive to Christianity. And wherever truth is absent, you can never have freedom. You can never have flourishing. And so we need the kind of education that's deeply rooted in truth.
Yeah.
And God has revealed this truth to us in a myriad ways.
Yeah.
And I think the classical tradition, coupled with that Christianity, is an attempt to mine these rich truths so as to produce freedom and flourishing, as opposed to a truth that's just good for salvation and what we do on a Sunday.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So how would you say New St. Andrews, because I would say everything you're talking about, they seem to be the leader in trying to go this direction.
Well, certainly trying to be. Certainly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that they're doing that is kind of pushing back against this? I don't know if they still have it, but I was in Moscow for Grace Agenda. This was actually during COVID time when I was there, but at that point they had this, I think they were called 30 Thesis
yes,
for cultural
30 theses.
engagement.
That's right.
Like
yes,
that, or
yes,
33 Theses
absolutely.
for cultural engagement.
Yeah.
They still have stuff like that? Or they
Absolutely. In fact, we still have the 30 Thesis material, and we still give it out and make it accessible for people to have. So that's a very real thing.
Yeah.
I think New St. Andrews hits this from various perspectives. I mean, our mission statement is to graduate leaders who can go on and shape culture under the lordship of Jesus Christ. Right? That's the goal. That's the mission. And the way that's done is just by developing the holistic faculties of a student. So it's more than just appealing to a student's intellect. It's about shaping their affections as well.
Yeah.
Helping them love the right things, loving what God loves, hating what God hates.
Yeah.
And that's just done by exposing them to truth, by mentorship. So classrooms are not merely these chambers where there's a download of information. It's meant to be holistic. Our faculty have real relationships with students, and they're mentoring them in the ways of truth, in the ways of beauty, in the ways of goodness. That's the way it's done. One of the things I love about NSA as well is that in developing the holistic faculties of a student, it doesn't just happen in the classroom. NSA's focus is on a whole life reformation and transformation. So students are actually expected to live in real covenant fellowship and community with other believers.
Yeah.
So, for example, NSA doesn't have a chapel because they're expected to be in covenant fellowship with God's people on a Sunday, as opposed to this pseudo type of church that happens on campus where students are not expected to really assume responsibility for the life of the church. Students, we don't have boarding houses for students intentionally because we treat our students like adults, and we want them to assume responsibility for themselves and learn to develop themselves in those ways. And in so doing and assuming this responsibility for themselves, and through all the instruction they're learning in rhetoric and languages and philosophy and law, all of that, they are being turned into people who can assume responsibility for other things beyond themselves as well. And so I like to think of NSA as a forge of cultural leadership. That's what this is about. We're hoping that our students will go on and assume positions of real influence, positions that can really move the needle on what culture looks like and influencing it from a distinctly Christian perspective. And so our pedagogy is rich that way. It's mentorship focused, a very strong dialectic that way, undergirded by theology in absolutely everything, and an encouragement to live the whole of life under the lordship of Christ in real covenant fellowship, in a real location, in a real city, a real town. So,
That's awesome. So how about maybe just some of your story? How did you get to where you're at now in Moscow, Idaho?
Excellent question. A simplistic answer would be, but still very true, is the providence of God. In other words, I have no idea how I got there. But very specifically, I'm from Zambia in sub-Saharan Africa. I grew up in South Africa though, and in God's providence, I was exposed to classical Christian education. And over the years have been seeking to advocate and propagate it in various places in Africa, and I'm very excited to see what's going on there. And one of the projects that I had some hand in was the African Christian University.
Okay. Is that where Dr. Bacham is at?
Yes, that's where Dr. Bacham is. He's a good friend. And I suppose over time there was a growing relationship between Moscow and Zambia. And foreign year opportunities were opening up. And my family and I made the move to Moscow about a year ago. So we're very glad to be there.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So maybe last question here, and that you could speak to one of the things that Pastor Doug said in his talk yesterday. He said, we have all this direction of things that we want to accomplish, but it's not just a wish that we're going to do. He said, if you go out into the Pacific Ocean and you go 2 miles deep, however wet it is, that's how Christian your town is going to be someday. Yeah. So talk about that, how that kind of confidence and the promises of God fuels what you guys do there at
absolutely. Yeah, that's so good. I mean, we're very optimistic people. We're a hopeful, joyful, cheerful, festive bunch. And that's not just because we're looking for a good time as an end in itself, but because there really is a real hope that's anchored in real promises in a real king who is really ruling the universe and really is sovereign. And not in a metaphorical sense. He really is King of Kings. He really is Lord of Lords. And those promises are thick. Those promises are real. And we stand on them and flourish. And I think God gives us history as an opportunity to understand what he's doing and building in this world. And so we know that these promises and believing these promises is potent. Whenever man has exercised any form of unbelief, there's always chaos and catastrophe. And it's standing on God's promises that enable us to really stand up to giants and to really do what we were called to do, and that's to build. It's when we stand on those promises that we have the courage to stand up to evil. One of our things that we like to say at New St. Andrews is, build and fight, those two things. And we understand that we need to fight evil. And we understand that we need to build distinctly Christian cultures. But that only happens when we're actually standing on God's word, when we're standing on his promises in a very real way. And understanding that God is fleshing out this beautiful story over time. And he welcomes us into this present moment, into this present chaos, to be what I'd consider redemptive change agents in the current culture. But again, it's not possible to do that effectively without standing on the promises of God. There's a sense in which when you stand on those promises, that's exactly what makes us joyful. That's exactly what makes us optimistic. And I think that joy and optimism they're very important tools of warfare. They're very important tools of building culture. They're not cheap smiles. It's not about cheap thrills. It's a deep and sure confidence in who God is and what he's accomplishing in this world. And so I think standing on that needs to be very thick and very deep. And when we stand on God's promises, even the most feeble efforts can devastate the greatest darknesses. The smallest amount of light can devastate the greatest darkness, as long as that light is rooted in truth. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, we are going into our third year as a school.
Right.
We haven't had a graduate yet. We have 4 that'll be up for graduation next year, but we're hoping to be able to send you guys a lot of students in the future.
We'll take them. We'll look after them. We'll turn them out into these compelling leaders in culture. Absolutely.
We're definitely thankful for what's happening out in Moscow, and New St. Andrews is a big part of that. So, but thank you also for your time today.
No, thank you. It's been an honor speaking to you. Thank you, brother.